on Prayer and Learning to Pray, Part 2, Using Words, all kinds of words, using no words at all. There's a striking impression of Jesus found in a letter to the Hebrews that, when he lived as a first-century Jewish Palestinian man, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears. Such a contrast, perhaps, to the meek and mild image many of us may have grown up with. Loud cries and tears. Here we find Jesus vocal and expressive. His prayers are prayed not just in his head, but in his whole body. Anyone who has ever cried knows that it affects all of you. Cries and tears have a way of reaching even sedimentary layers of the soul. This stunning picture of Jesus at prayer is in a style that is far from demure, re-emphasizing again that God is open to the way we express ourselves, however it comes out. God is welcoming of the many ways we use our prayerful words and is appreciative of the wordless language of our bodies. Prayers in the Psalms, for example, are filled with emotions, dark ones, including the feeling of complete abandonment. Here is just one, placed on the lips of our beloved Jesus, hanging on a cross in excruciating agony, crying out to God before he dies. My God, why have you forsaken me? Of course, when these and other similar emotional passages are read liturgically, they are most times dry and drained of the drama of real life. But in real time, as part of our honest prayers, there are moments when some of us cry, shout, rant and rave in God's presence. These ancient texts are an echo of our shared humanity. Though God may have a very tender heart, God has very thick skin. God allows us to bring it on, as it were. Not everyone is at home in this loud, discursive style of prayer, but it is the home of some, and it is a style attributed to Jesus and his people. If it is not your default mode, why not give yourself permission occasionally to use your body and words, all of your vocabulary, a little more loudly as you pour out your heart to God? It is very Jewish to pray gutturally, to feel the effects of it throughout your system, to use posture, movement and gestures as part of your haggling and wrestling with God. So pleased that we as Anglicans are part of a prayer and worship tradition that engages with the body too. We sit, kneel, genuflect, bow. We raise our hands in prayer and praise. We sign ourselves with a cross. We touch our lips and heart. At ordination services, the candidate prostrates herself. We use holy oil and holy water and apply these things prayerfully to our bodies. Before even saying a word, we are communicating so much. Here is a short video of a young Jewish learner at prayer. When I was on sabbatical in 2019, I found him at the Western Wall. It was about 2:00 in the afternoon on an ordinary weekday. He seemed to have been pouring his heart out to God. And although he was there in a public space, he was clearly in a world of his own, having gone through the veil and into that inner room teaching attributed to Jesus. It highlights an important feature about prayer. When we pray, we find ourselves at a doorway, a threshold to that inner room, and so we can really be anywhere. Access is always ours and eternally granted. You are God's love after all. This quote by a North African church parent, Origen of Alexandria, is apt. A place becomes a place of prayer when we pray in it. The young learner at the Western Wall appeared to have lived this very well. Not caught up in the distraction of others, he stood there and prayed. Entering through the doorway, he found himself profoundly in God's presence while the world continued to turn on its axis. Muslims enter into this undistractedness too by stepping onto a prayer mat, sometimes in very public, unsheltered places. God's presence is everywhere. Your body as God's temple is how our tradition expresses this truth. Prayer is the doorway, the invitation in. And gratitude, being thankful, saying thank you, is perhaps one of the biggest keys that opens this door to the heart of our heart. Thank you must be one of the most natural prayers a human being is able to pray. No wonder the 13th century German theologian Meister Eckhart summed it up like this: if the only prayer you ever pray is thank you, that will be enough. Use your words, your mother tongue. Talk to God either in your head or out loud. The gift of your imagination helps. Don't deride it. You may also need a few spoonfuls of unself-consciousness. Talking to God is much like talking to a flower or a tree or a beloved pet. In time, it evolves into a conversation, and so you're not just the only one doing the talking. You also listen and learn to hear or read what the other is saying. Many of us have not been taught to be terribly expressive in our prayers, or we've not given ourselves permission to. God is not as fragile as you may think, nor is God quick to take offense. Use your words in God's presence. Turn the internal volume up or down. Exhaust yourself if you must. In time, you may begin to overhear what the Spirit is saying. Here is a wonderful ancient teaching on prayer, again by Origen of Alexandria. In it, he advocates using no words or very few. The teaching is offered in a handful of sentences making up a paragraph. It's deceptive in its simplicity, but when practiced, can be very rewarding. Origen counsels: settle your mind. Put yourself in God's presence and act as though God was there looking at you. Then you will hear the Lord's reply, "Here I am." This is the greatest answer to prayer, to know the presence of God. You do not pray alone. Christ prays with you, and the angels pray with you. Settle your mind. Gosh, this could take a while. Our minds can be everywhere except present, except here. The gift of your breath helps to settle your mind. It is also good to remember often that you are so much more than your thoughts, and you are certainly not the sum of them. If your mind is as skittish or loopy as a monkey, settle it by breathing and relaxing more consciously into the present moment. Claim as often as you must, "I am more than my thoughts. I am even more than the way I feel." When thoughts and feelings rush in, as they will do, let them also rush out. This practice takes time. Negative ones, I know, tend to be like Velcro. Offer them very little place to stick. When they do, they can be felt in your jaw and clenched teeth, in the muscles of your face, down the back of your neck and shoulders, into your scapulars, felt also in the churning of your gut. Come back to the calming gift of your breath. Let it travel into those tense and stuck places to relax them. Drop your shoulders as you breathe out. Sometimes it's also good to do something physical. Throw a ball, take a run, walk. Do something to raise your heart rate appropriate to your age and health. Settle your mind. Origin counsels. Put yourself in God's presence and act as though God was there, looking at you. God is always present, but we are the distant and absent ones, so it requires purpose to put ourselves in God's presence. How do we do this? Praying in a certain place or at a certain time or in a certain chair helps to put you in God's presence. Stepping onto a prayer mat, the same size as a bathroom mat, has a similar effect. Do it consciously, compassionately, purposefully. Bowing your head, putting your hands gently together to pray does the same. Infuse these actions and intentions with sincerity and love. Origin continues. Act as though God was there, looking at you. Remember always that the eyes of God are loving. The look of God is compassionate and welcoming. God is not there to clobber you into submission. God is love, hidden in the many expressions of love. Allow God to gaze upon you, to radiate acceptance, courage, peace, and love back into you. In time, with the ear of the heart, you will hear the Lord's reply, "Here I am." Rest in God's presence. Let God's gaze restore you. With the ear of your heart, you will hear the Lord's reply, "Here I am." Origin concludes. This is the greatest answer to prayer, to know the presence of God. You do not pray alone. Christ prays with you, and the angels pray with you. Origen writes all of this in a paragraph, but it really is a practice over a lifetime. Give yourself to what works for you. Be excessively gentle and patient with yourself. This is not a race, but holy work, and you are on holy ground. You do not pray alone. Jesus the Christ and the angels pray with you too.